of where, oh, recording in progress, got it. About where we ended last time and give it a quick overview of where we're going today. So likely a short meeting today, so that'll be another treat as we close out this crazy busy week. So just as a reminder, during our August meeting, that's when we got together to prioritize our emerging recommendations so that the full continuum could consider those at the September meeting. And that list, if you would like to review it anytime today or anytime, frankly, is in your Google folder. If Joette were here, I'd ask her to put that link in the chat, but I have that open on my desktop, so I'll put it in the chat here in just a second, so you'll have easy access. So during the full continuum meeting then, we further prioritize the recommendations. And as a reminder, we came up with this top three. So I'm going to read those to you. Number one, employ more post-secondary transition advisors to help students plan for and transition to post-secondary education. Number two, ensure that every high school student has access to at least one early post-secondary opportunity and the support to successfully complete the course, particularly those students and families who have been traditionally underrepresented in early post-secondary opportunities. And then our third prioritized recommendation is enhance the recruitment of future teachers to increase the number of teachers with an emphasis on underrepresented groups. So one top priority from each of the subgroups bubbled up at that full continuum meeting in September. So since that time, Erin, Amanda, Jennifer, and the team have been working with our state agency partners who have been tasked with reviewing the priorities and determining possible action steps that they think it'll take to implement these top three big ideas. So with that, Amanda, I think I hit on kind of where we have been, what's in process now, and then I think I turn it over to you and Erin to talk more about the legislative and budgetary requests and where we are in that process right now.
Yes, ma'am, you are correct. So thank you so much for that kickoff. So I'm going to give just a brief overview of the actions and the things that we have already discussed with KDE, of course, CPE, KIA. When we met in the continuum in September, it was a great discussion. And the hardest part was the continuum having to prioritize the recommendations you all put forth, each work group put forth, because they said, well, all of them are important. And we said 100%. And it doesn't mean we're not going to do work towards those. But if you want to put our efforts, where do you want us to put our efforts? And so I want to share with you what we've collected so far and what the state agencies have committed to, if there's a budgetary request, and then I'll turn it over to Aaron to really talk about the importance of advocacy and where he sees this, because he's definitely the expert in that area. But I will also tell you that was not planned is I've even had a few of our state K groups. So our Association of School Administrators, our Association of Superintendents, different groups have actually contacted me this week saying, you know, I've reviewed those recommendations and I think we can help advocate for this. I think we really want to have this in our agenda. So I am really encouraged by the fact of people taking this on, not because they're required to, it's not a statutory requirement, but it's what's right for students in Kentucky. And I'm very encouraged by that. And so, so stay tuned. So you'll see, I'm going to share my screen. So bear with me. So I don't make you dizzy on any of these things. I'm going to share with you. Let me pull it up here. And if somebody can give me a thumbs up if they can see that. Okay, thank you. I want to show you all the work that this work group did and what those actions, if you will remember, you had some suggested actions. And so just as Lou said, we sent those out to the agency saying, is this doable? Is this something you're even considering or willing to do? Or are you already doing some work that we're just not aware of? And so we try to capture that, but you'll notice on the form, it says draft in huge letters. So definitely a work in progress. I want to make sure that you all have your eyes on this so you can give some feedback if there's anything you feel like we've missed or ideas that we maybe have not captured well. And then we can adjust that document for the December continuum meeting. So the very first recommendation, I'm just going to hit these briefly, but I want you to know where we are, is this is why it's in green. As Lou had read, this was the priority that the continuum felt like needed to be the focus, which is employ more post-secondary transition advisors to help students plan for and transition to post-secondary education. And we have had multiple conversations from this work group on the importance and the difficult work of helping students and families and different audiences, right? So you have the military, you have adult learners, to really help them navigate. But specifically with this focus is really around high school students and their families, and how do you navigate through that? And so needing the advisors and the expertise. Let me move this over here. And so the actions that we are actually moving forward with is CPE has taken this under our wing. We feel like this is really important, of course, in partnership with others. So anytime we say we're doing this alone, there's nothing we can do really well that's statewide and do it alone. We really have to do work in collaboration with our partners, and it makes it much more powerful, as you can see with this continuum. But the very first action step that was requested is create a statewide program to strengthen post-secondary transition advising practices through the creation of local communities of practice, state and national networks, in order to aid counselors, college and career coaches, and family resource youth service center coordinators. The landscape, post-secondary landscape that's constantly changing, and opportunities across the state. And so we are actually requesting $4 million from the General Assembly. So Dr. Thompson is very much on board, and you'll hear from him in a minute, or anytime, of course, on how committed we are to this. And we really are honoring the work and requests of the continuum, because we feel like this is a missing piece and something we really need to strengthen in Kentucky. If we were to be granted this money, that work would start in July. And so we do have other efforts that I'll share with you, but this is something that we have a specific ask for, because we feel like we can really expand these services and really build out. There are lots of good things happening in our state, but collectively coming together with what our real focus is. The second piece on this is you'll see CPE and KDE in partnership of implement the Kentucky Advising Academy to provide a free comprehensive series of face-to-face and virtual professional learning and resources centered on post-secondary advising for the same audiences. Excuse me. We're not asking General Assembly dollars for this project because we were granted $4 million in COVID aid. So the Gear 2 funds were given to us through the cabinet and the governor's office to really emphasize the focus on advising, especially coming out of COVID, knowing that there are lots of missing links and lots of need with our students, especially in that transition period and navigating. And then ARP funds, which actually came from KDE, granted us another $3 million to really expand this out. And we have a great partnership with the Northern Kentucky Compact, which is AmeriCorps. And so we're really able to get out, and we are focusing on all 8 regions as identified by the cooperatives to really build out this professional learning. Now, this is not us instilling knowledge on everybody else. We actually had a design team that has represented different folks. We have Kia at the table, we have Gear Up at the table, we have advisors, we have college advisors at the table, we have counselors. We have lots of folks at the table who are saying, this is our resource, this is what we use. And we're really bringing those together to identify the non-negotiable pieces of how we really try to build capacity with the folks who work with our students every day. So those are 2 big pieces just with the first recommendation. And I will put this in the chat for you to see and internalize too, because this is in addition to what is in your folder. The other recommendations that are on here that are not highlighted but are just as important that you all have put forward to the continuum is create a comprehensive communications campaign to better equip high school students with the necessary knowledge and to successfully transition to post-secondary. Although we don't need any additional funds on this or legislation, we are working closely with KDE to pilot a letter or notification of students meeting minimum GPA criteria to be considered for admission. We have work to do with our post-secondary institutions and colleges to talk about those criteria and get all on board. But we did do a small pilot with Infinite Campus through KDE with some districts just for notification of seniors of just if their GPA met the minimum criteria for consideration to be admitted. So just to see if that was the right avenue to go through and to reach more students and to get feedback in those feedback loops. But we're just now having conversations with provost and admissions advisors, and been in conversation with them about how we can really do this well, be meaningful, and that we are setting students up for success. So we did a small pilot. We're learning from that, but we'd like to see that expand. And we have great partnership with KDE on that, lots of interest. And the districts are very interested, as well as some of the post-secondary institutions say, we need to do this. We just got to get it right. And couldn't agree more. The statewide web-based resource hub for targeted audiences to access resources and information regarding early post-secondary opportunities for institutions, career pathways, financial aid. KDE, CPE, and KY Stats are working together. There were ESSER dollars, CPE put funds forward, KY Stats put funds forward to bring staff together and really build out a Kentucky portal that helps students and families navigate, as well as adult learners and veterans. And we are in the process of developing that. That project has officially been kicked off, and we have great synergy around this. So the efforts have begun, and I'm really looking into what's already offered, how we can bring more folks in and really make it a comprehensive tool that's intuitive and friendly for our families and students. You'll see recommendation 3 was catalyze a statewide cross-agency campaign to improve FAFSA completion rates and access to FAFSA data for schools and districts. Kia obviously really wanted to be the lead on this. This is a big part of what they do, but we definitely are wanting to come together as a state to do that. So Kim Dolan is actually convening folks November 30th to start talking statewide about what that cross-agency work can do to elevate the importance of FAFSA and financial aid. So really happy about that. They've already started that work and very excited about it. And then you'll see the other FAFSA efforts that were recommended as far as actions is develop and provide FAFSA related training and resources on statewide scale to better equip schools and school counselors, post-secondary folks, so on and so forth. And that is continuing work through their college coaches, but we certainly can expand that when we work together to do that instead of just one agency, but really having a unified message. And then just increase the overall FAFSA completion initiative. There's lots of initiatives. Last week, we had a Govember from our Gear Up that really partnered with Kia. We had excellent turnout. I will tell you, for the craziest week, on Wednesday, there were over 200 people signed up to hear Kia's speech about, or their message about grants versus scholarships versus aid. What does it mean? Over 200 families signed up. They had about 45% participation. So if you look at that for online participation that doesn't cost anything, it's free, and it's on a Wednesday night, it's a pretty good response rate for short-term, really getting the word out on that. So we're really encouraged by that partnership and know that we need to do more. Shauna, do you want to have a question about one of those two? I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand before. Oh, you're muted.
I'm used to my Teams buttons. It takes a minute to find the Zoom buttons.
No problem.
So if you scroll back up, the piece that talked about developing the web portal of resources.
Yes.
And the language seems to be a bit specific to, traditional transitioning traditional students, but given the demographics and the fact that the numbers of those students are decreasing and numbers of adults and non-traditional students are increasing, I mean, will it be intentional to be inclusive of the less traditional students?
Yes, so great question. So one of the things that we have built into our plan is being very intentional about our specific audiences and what tools and resources would be most helpful to those audiences. So for example, we know that KY Stats provides information on proximity from the university or job opportunities from where they are. 18-year-old kids probably don't care about that as much as adults who have families who say, I really can't move. I've got to be here. And so I can go after these jobs in this area. I can seek out, credentials or degrees in this area. So we're trying to be very specific to the audience in which we are serving. And the other piece on that, to ensure that we're relevant and that it is helpful, is we have focus groups built in specifically around those audiences. So it's not going to be at the end to see what breaks, but it's throughout the development and the design, is that we bring those focus groups in right away, early on, even with functionality, to make sure that we're meeting the needs of those individual audiences, to your point. So it's not exclusive to just traditional students by any means, but the goal is to have a friendly, intuitive site where people don't feel intimidated or feel like that they don't belong. Part of it is being worthy of wherever you are in life. If you're on-ramping back into some type of a credential or a degree or something you're interested in a career, that you don't feel intimidated or that it's exclusive to a certain student. Does that make sense?
It does, and I appreciate that. I guess it was just the language.
That was just the action step.
Early post-secondary opportunities that felt a little narrowing to me.
Sure. No, that it will. That's the one main thing we're talking about, is just functionality and approach to the audience in which we serve.
Thank you.
I appreciate the question very much. Okay, and then I'm just going to finish us out with, you guys were the only ones with 4 recommendations because your group is quite broad and hits a lot of areas. The other piece is the recommendation on expand into institutional capacity to support students as they transition. And there were a couple action steps. So one of the ones we're really focusing in on are to continue the summer bridge programming grants and expand opportunities to the summer before junior year. That's been discussed, as how do we expand that to start before. We did summer bridge grants. They came out late because we had GEAR funds later in the season. And so we're actually going to put out the RFP in January and adjust our RFP process to be more intentional and strategic about how to really reach students and to meet those specific needs, and to solicit more participation. Some institutions had really great success with soliciting students and keeping them in that summer bridge, and others did not have a very easy time. And that was in that transition, coming back, starting to transition back into a campus, or the first time they've been on campus. And so we are definitely learning lessons from the reports from those who had grants last year. We were allocated additional funds from KDE's ARP funds. We are incredibly grateful. So we have the second set of GEAR funds and new ARP funds, and we'll be able to continue this process through September 2023. And so we're really excited about that support and transition piece in the summer bridge. So I'm going to stop talking. Dr. Thompson, you have been really quiet. So it must be Friday and you must be tired, because you would typically interrupt me a few times. So I'm going to turn it to you to speak on this.
Well, I was really trying not to interrupt, and believe me, I've been talking a lot this morning already in many ways, but it's interesting. One of the conversations I had this morning is that someone told me that I had big asks. And I said, well, yeah, I mean, we have big needs in Kentucky. And one of the pieces that I want to discuss here, and I think it's important that I'll just pick up on where Shauna was at. You're right, we have a decreasing high school population group in Kentucky, but we also have something worse, and that's a decreasing college going from those who are graduating. So this portal is also designed to push those folks so they don't become a non-traditional adult learner, right? I mean, so it needs to do all of that. And so we're going to get the kind of inputs to make that happen. And even if they are young, and even if they're not as young, I mean, we're finding out in Kentucky a growing element of adult learners are not even 25. They're somewhere between 21 and 24, but got kids and a variety of other things that need to go back. So we need to change our whole way of thinking about this. And a part of this conversation, I know I'm a little bit off script here, Amanda, sorry. You shouldn't have asked me to talk.
It's all good.
Part of what we have to think about here with this group and other groups like ours is exactly what does it mean to provide the education to all those that need it, no matter where they're at on the continuum. And I think this is a conversation. I was just at a national conference and tell you, we're the only state doing this stuff at the level we are. So we have opportunities here that we haven't even considered, I think. So Sean, I appreciated your question, because I think those are the questions that we have to think about, that population we're serving. And all these points that we're trying to make and these asks that we're asking have to really focus on, I think, many items and some yet we haven't discussed. Anyway, I just wanted to give that a little preamble to just say I appreciate all the recommendations. I just want to say that we're dedicated. I've had a chance to talk with Jason, and of course, Lou is here, a chance to talk with Lieutenant Governor about, you know, all of these items. We've ranked them, no doubt about it, but that doesn't mean those that haven't lifted themselves up to this time ask for dollars that mean that they're less important. We're going to work on all of these. And some are going to come easier to us than the others, no doubt. So I wanted to say that first of all. Secondarily, we have to stay on the same page here. One of the things that, once again, that has been reiterated to me and that I've experienced now in these many years in Frankfurt, the more we're on the same page, and I think the presidents of the institutions would agree with me, and the higher ed institutions, when we go in with a uniform ask and no one gets off that page, we have a much greater chance of getting those dollars for those asks. Maybe not exactly what we asked for, but a chance of getting it. When one gets off the page, you know, that creates an opening that's huge. So what we're wanting to make sure that we do in this continuum is stay on the same page. And so what we've tried to do here, and a lot of things that floated to the top, I was really happy. Some things that didn't float to the top that I said, well, God, why didn't that float to the top? But that doesn't mean I'm going to take those items and put ahead of those that floated to the top. So I would ask us to stay on the same page, number one, to advocate, number two. You guys are part of this simply because you have advocacy power. You have knowledge, true enough, but you have advocacy power. And this advocacy power has to be done in a way that serves all of our kids. Lou has heard me say this many times when people ask me, what do we need to do for higher education? I say, create an early childhood system and a great K-12 system, or P-12 system. I mean, so this can't be a conversation that we have in our silos, can't be a conversation we have at KCTCS alone or at our four-year institutions alone, or even in our K-12 education system. So that's number two. Number three, and I think this is important, we have a shot this time of really, we're already getting some stuff done. I mean, who would have ever thought we're getting this amount of stuff done this fast? And I think we've gotten used to here lately getting a lot of good stuff done. And so we can really just look at that as normal. Well, in Kentucky, that hasn't been as fully normal as it should have been, but it's becoming normal, and that's good. But what I'm arguing is that as we make this quote unquote the new normal of innovation, I ask that we think about how we then look at this in a way that we see it as really unique and really argue that it's unique. And tell all your folk you talk to that it's unique and that we're doing something in Kentucky that's unique. It's become a little normal for us, but that uniqueness is what is normal. And I think I would need for y'all to come on, brush up on your elevator speeches a little bit, because I don't think we're hearing from you as much on the Capitol as I'd like to see. And I don't want to be the only one carrying the water. Lou doesn't want to be, other people don't want to be by themselves. So I ask you all to know the power you bring to the table. And the last one, I think this is reasonable for all of us to say, that we're going to have to build internal constituency. We represent different groups. That doesn't mean we represent them just in these meetings. That means we go back to our individual places of employment, places where we have, the kind of colleagues that we want to discuss this with. We've got to start pushing this down more. That's what I'm realizing in some of our institutions, that we're talking about this. Many of the other folks, they tell me, well, I didn't know y'all were doing that. I didn't hear. I didn't see your meeting. Well, our goal here is to represent. Our goal is to let people, if you really buy into this stuff, you don't buy into it, you tell us, right? But if you really buy into this, you need to represent too, not just out in the outward advocacy, but the inward advocacy, because we have to build. I mean, we are the choir. You've heard me say this more than once. We are the choir, but our job is to be choir directors now and to help everybody else to sing and sing well. So I'm asking you to do that, and know that I will do it. You know, some of you know me really well. I sing, even if I don't think I'm singing. I mean, even if other people don't think I'm singing well, I think I have a beautiful voice. So I would ask you all to kind of take on the same attitude, if you wouldn't mind. Amanda, unless people have questions for me, that's probably not exactly what you wanted me to do, but I never do exactly what people want me to do.
That was perfect. No, that's perfect. And I think Elizabeth had a question, if I saw that correctly. Elizabeth, did you have your hand raised?
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. Well, I have two things. So one, when you talk about using Infinite Campus, I think that's a great idea because everybody has it and there's so much information on there that you can sort it by so many different ways. So I guess my point that I'd like to make is I really hope you will use predictive capabilities that are available, because it's one thing to tell a kid their junior year that they have a grade point that qualifies them for whatever college, but it's another thing if you're telling them freshman year and then they're seeing a change. You know, it was predicted one thing and then things are happening that are changing their options and their outcomes. So even, I mean, you could add in attendance, you could add in AP, you could say, hey, great job taking an AP course that puts you more on track for college. There's so many things that you can do with that.
I so appreciate you saying that. So exactly. So what we want to do, or what we've talked about doing, is that we'd love to see a letter go home each year to really start talking about things early, but exactly to your point of the importance of taking advantage of an early post-secondary opportunity and the benefits of that. Start talking about financial aid so it's not so scary your senior year, or we drop it all on the parents all at once, but have a few things to focus on each year about the importance of investing in your education each year and what's important. And you're 100% right. There are so many things that can happen to navigate that. Attendance is huge. It's huge. Being involved, taking advantage of leadership opportunities and volunteer, you know, all those things help build the vision of, I think, the profile of a graduate, what we want, all those essential skills of what we want them to be able to do. I think there's opportunities to build that out. And, you know, many districts have that. They have their outlook of what they want to see a graduate look like. And so to me, this would definitely not be done in siloed. It would really be a table of folks going, what would we want freshmen to know? When they first start, all freshmen, not just a few, not just the ones who've always been the hand selected, but what do we want all freshmen to know? That they are worthy. And what is that going to take to get there? And so I really appreciate your comments, Elizabeth, because you're 100% right. And we want to get it right, because when we talk to our post-secondary partners, they will say, if I could just get to them their freshman year and start talking to them their freshman year, and they're in high school. So they're talking, and I hate that it's the last, you know, senior year. So what do we want them to know? And what do we want them to develop into and to be and to know what's important? And that same message to be to families, because it's not that they don't care. Sometimes they just don't know. And it's a lot. And, you know, I mean,
you don't start with a family their freshman year as well. If you're a first generation kid, the whole family is going to college with you.
The whole family. That's right.
So
that's
you've got to
exactly
start convincing them that this is the right investment to make in their child.
Absolutely. I so appreciate your comments. Yeah, go ahead, Aaron. I'm sorry.
Elizabeth, I also want to say one other thing about predictability. It's not just Infinite Campus, even though that's the technology you can use to do some predictability. All the research shows, I'll tell people, if you don't believe me, buy one of my books. I talk about it. You know, it shows that also you can take that information, and once you translate it to human capital, in other words, when people inside that high school, as an example, whomever, teachers, advisors, counselors, whatever, you translate that into human capital and help the students to know there's a predictability fashion. And this is what we call, this increases the likelihood that they buy into it and live it out somewhere around 20% more. So a part of what we're called to do too is to, I know we talk about families, And we do all this in what I consider to be a very theoretical way of doing it. Then we ask people, how have you done it? Then it's harder for people to answer. My argument, and our Gear Up folk who's on here can really talk about this, but you know, I think we take that predictability and put some human legs on it in addition. And so the predictability by itself on Infinite Campus can only do so much. The outlay, the pieces of that can be used to triangulate a student's understanding about where he or she can go with their human capital, with their skin in the game, if you will, also increases the likelihood. So I really appreciate that statement, even in a bigger way than probably you meant it for it to be.
That's right. Thank you, Elizabeth. I think Shauna, you had your hand raised, and then Mary.
So we had an opportunity to hear in KCTCS in a enrollment management venue from Dr. Joe Schaefer, who's the president of Laramie Community College in Wyoming. He's pointed to at the national level of doing some really fine guided pathway work. And he made a couple of comments that are really kind of percolating in our world. One is that they are reaching down now to middle school students to get them on that pathway. They're not waiting for them to be high school freshmen and doing some career exploration at the middle school level. But another really interesting point he made around dual credit, and as we're all painfully aware, I don't know about the 4 years, but KCTCS could do a much better job of transitioning and converting our dual credit taking students, as he pointed out that perhaps we're making a mistake by focusing so much, talking about a course, taking a dual credit course here and there that kind of that leads to a kind of a disparate, course taking, credit accumulation, and recommended that we be a lot more focused and use language around programs with these students, that that you're not just taking a course here and a course there and hoping that all the pieces will eventually fit together, that we need to talk more about, you are on this program pathway toward a career in X, and this course taking pattern is going to help get you there faster, better. And so, we're thinking a lot about that.
Thank you, Shauna. Yeah, I agree. I think the meaningful piece, and that goes to the advising, of why this is so important to help navigate that. It's really tough. Mary, I think you had your hand straight. Everybody keeps hopping around on my screen, so I want to make sure I'm not missing anybody. Go ahead, Mary. Sorry.
Hey, how are you today, Dr. Ellis? A few comments. So I think that was her name was Shauna. I think that's her name. Hi, we actually are doing some of that in Kentucky. I work with an organization that's a leg of the council called Gear Up Kentucky. And we are starting at the middle school level in Kentucky with post-secondary transition and what that looks like. So that is occurring here. But I do want to say that I appreciate all of the comments on messaging. And I'd like for us to make sure that we remember that we should certainly focus on the students' strengths and their passions and their interests, and not focus on making sure that we are not placing value on one type of post-secondary pathway in terms of education or another, because there seems to be this huge emphasis on, go to a 4-year, go to a 4-year, go to a 4-year. And, Dr. Thompson has talked about this many times. I've heard in many of his comments and speeches that, nationally, the conversation needs to be changed in terms of what we name as college. A lot of people think that if they go to a 2-year school or if they get a certificate in welding, they're not going to college. And that's not true. So I want to make sure that we don't forget that.
No, Mary, I'm so glad you said that. And that's a conversation we even had about really defining, as Dr. Thompson does talk a lot about what college really means, and really being explicit about that. And even with the portal of whatever we promote, that there are lots of avenues, right? And so and what's the ultimate goal around it. So even to Shauna's point around just not taking random courses, but what are some options out there? It may not have to narrow down into, you know, exactly what you want to do, but what are your options, and how do you go after that in a meaningful way? And that's highly important. And to me, which goes back to a lot, Mary, of what you all do around advising and making folks aware of even what's out there and what it means. And I know, you know, I did forget to mention, Stephanie, I see you on my screen too, as part of the advising piece that the ask is in, also encompasses different ways of how advising occurs depending on what the culture is of that community. So, you know, Stephanie works with the Teach for America, and we've talked with her about the advising piece of the work that they're already doing in Eastern Kentucky. I know that Partners for Education does it in a community sense, because the community absolutely has influence on the students and how they support those students. And the same thing is what they're learning through the Urban League in Jefferson County, that Sadiqa is really looking at a community focus on advising. So when we talk about advising, even, it's not your traditional, what you would think of as a counselor sitting down with an individual student at a school. It could look very different. And so we want to honor that cultural differences and what really matters depending on where the students are regionally. And so I failed to mention that. And so, you know, the language was the suggestion, the suggested action. But when we dig into that and learn from our partners, from people on this call that have really schooled us on different approaches, that is something that we definitely want to honor. It's not just a one way to do it, but how do we equip folks when they do have the opportunity, that they know the information, they know where to find it, and they have the resources. So Stephanie, I'm sorry I dropped you a while ago on that. I didn't mention it, but I did want to bring that up because it is definitely, and even Shauna, to your point, there's not just a one way with the traditional. Like, we have lots of folks coming on and off ramps into education, and we don't want to miss them. We don't want to miss them. We want to give them opportunities. And even with the notification that we've talked about, we don't want that to be a false positive where they can't sustain. So we have to learn about helping them sustain. So all of that work, and I got the opportunity to sit with Gear Up with their curricula development and advising techniques this week. And we were exhausted by the end, because this is not easy. And to Dr. Thompson's point, not everybody's doing this because it's hard and it's messy and it's fluid. And so kudos for you guys sticking with us and the work that you do in your own respective agencies or institutions. It is no joke. And so, but I think definitely worthy, and we can't stop. We just got to keep chugging along and getting it right. So I am going to transition us to, where do we go from here? Like, so what, Ellis? What are you doing with all this? So where we are, I want to be totally transparent of, you all have seen the draft. I did put that in the chat of the actions. I will tell you that could even change. That's why it has the draft on it, because I have K groups contacting me right and left. I have 3 calls between now and Monday to say, hey, how can we get on board with this? Like, this aligns with our request, which I'm elated. So stay tuned. But what we're going to do, like, this is the last official meeting of this work group. And this is why. So this year, focused on that post-secondary transition with the deep dive into the research, the landscape of Kentucky, the feedback, the voices from our field that we've heard from all across our state, and the recommendations. And so now the hard work starts. So it goes into that implementation piece, as Dr. Thompson mentioned, and Dr. Young as well, is now it's time for us to put boots on the ground and start the work and getting it going if we haven't already started, or really ramping this up. And this is where the hard part comes in. Session starts in January. It's a long one. We're asking for money. Now's the time when they have money. And Dr. Thompson's right. Like, it's got to be a unified voice, because everybody wants the extra money. Everybody wants to push their initiatives, and understandably so. But what we're going to be doing as we transition out of this planning and recommendation phase and into implementation, then we are going to start a new topic in 2022 with this same cycle of deep dive research. What else do we need to look at? What's the next thing we need to look at on our pipeline? Because the continuum doesn't end after a year, and it's not a project. It is a collaboration that is ongoing, that continuous improvement cycle. So I'm going to turn it over to Brianna here in a minute, but we really want you to be boldly honest about your experience with this work group. This was brand new, on how we were trying to implement, honor the voices of our Commonwealth, capture people to come in. You've spent a lot of hours with us on Zoom, which is not always preferable, but I'm eternally grateful because you didn't have to do this. And we really have momentum that's going much faster than we ever thought was going to happen. And when I told Dr. Thompson we would make this work, I never imagined it to be full steam ahead quite this fast. And I'm really grateful and excited about what's happening in Kentucky. He is right. Collaboration does not happen everywhere, but Kentucky gets that right. When we put it together, we get that right. It's just in our blood. And so we will take the recommendations. I will make some adjustments to the language based on our conversation today to make sure it's really reflective. And then we will go to the continuum in December, talk through that, give everybody that final look, and help put out some language of what we can share. And that will conclude the 2021 work, and then implementation will be kicked off. In the future, depending on whatever those topics are, and that will be decided, we're going to ask for your recommendations today on next step topics. We've asked the continuum members to give that same feedback, and we meet with the co-leads. So that's Dr. Thompson, of course, Dr. Glass, and Lieutenant Governor Coleman, to sit and really look at those topics and how do they want to go forward with the next topic. That will drive our work around the next group of work groups. So please stay tuned on that piece if you want to remain engaged in this work, because there are definite opportunities. As far as this work group, what I am committed to doing, because I have all your emails, is to send updates as to what the work is happening. So you know what to share in your respective institutions and agencies, because we need to share our message. We need to share our story of the work that's taking place collectively. So I do commit to that, to sending you updates to let you know where we are and the movement and things you can share. But that's kind of where we are in this process, where we're going. And we feel like we're moving in that right direction. Dr. Young or Dr. Thompson, is there anything you want to add to that before I turn it over to Brianna?
I would just hearken back. All of those comments are so helpful, and thank you for your commitment to the successful transition work group. And while our amazingly exciting Zoom meetings will be coming to an end, your role as an advocate in this work is just now gearing up. So think about that swell now in terms of you have all of the resources in the Google folder. You've heard the conversations, you've contributed significantly to the conversation. So how do we move forward with that advocacy hat on and continue to move this work? And then I feel certain, because she has all of our emails, some of us will be recycled in this work for further contributions as we move forward. So in that regard, I'm a big believer in each one reach one. So think about who it is in your circle of folks who need to be engaged in this work, who have not been for whatever reason. Maybe this 2021 just wasn't the right year for them to do that, but how might we expand our network of co-conspirators in such a way that we continue to move this work affirmatively forward on behalf of the full continuum of education across the Commonwealth?
Absolutely. Dr. Thompson, do you have any other words before we hand it over to Brianna?
No, I mean, just a little bit of what Lou said, but, just to add on, not to repeat her words, this is ongoing. This is not something that's going to die. Whether y'all are part of this group or not next time is really not the question. You're because you've already energized yourself into the happening, if you will, into the movement. And that's the way I would want us to think about this. This is a movement. It is the big, yes, this 2021 was the beginning of the movement, but it's not the end of the movement. A lot of us may not be around here very much longer, and some of us will be here a lot longer. But the idea that this should be around here for a long, long time. So I would, I would just add on once again to what Lou is saying. How do you ensure that to be the case? If you think about it, we already got more than one or two of these things done. But if we get even more than this done, just think about it. We haven't done this before. I mean, think about that. Think about these are the conversations we've had in silos for so long that we're now getting done. It's a movement. We're not going to get Kentucky where it needs to go. Some of you are tired of hearing me make this statement. But we've got to make sure that people understand the role of higher education and P-12 education has in the building of this state, and this is not purely marketing. It is a little bit about marketing, but it's not purely marketing. This is an ideology. And so what we're doing is really putting legs on this ideology. We are putting real practical, strategic implementation processes in place. So I would ask you to do exactly that. I know we're going to give our next steps here in a second, but from me, as the head of higher ed, I appreciate all that you're doing. I appreciate what this stuff means. And I'm not trying to give you a howl speech or some inspiration here. I am just trying to say practically, this is what we should be doing in our professions. And this is something that matters. So thank you all very much. Great working with you this year. Lou, well, it was great actually being your partner. You carried most of the load. I was just here to look good. So.
You are the handsome spokesmodel.
I am indeed. So no, I really do appreciate Lou and Jennifer, Joette, Amanda, I appreciate it, ESG, all you guys, Brianna and everybody else. Thank you all for the work, and I look forward to working with you more in the future.
Thank you very much. So Brianna, I'm going to turn it to you for what we need to do next.
Yeah, definitely. I'll just echo what's already been said, but really appreciate the opportunity to work with you all these last several months. Continue to be inspired by your passion and commitment to collaboration, as well as your commitment to lifting up stakeholder voice and community voice and these recommendations. So we want to gather feedback on your experience, look back a little bit over the last year and what went well and where we could maybe improve as we continue to refine this process, as well as looking ahead, like Amanda said, to what you all think might be some good topics to cover in 2022. So we are going to have you all complete this short survey. We'd really appreciate it if you could take the time to do it. And especially since we're having a little bit of a shorter meeting today, if you could use these last few minutes to take the time to go through it, we'd really appreciate it.
Yes, and please make sure you can open the link. Some people have like some extra securities on their email. So
yeah, is everyone able to access that? Great, cool.
Okay, you have 70 whole minutes of found time right now. Do not squander them.
that's exactly right. So I won't hold you on here to watch you take a survey, but I do truly appreciate you. I wish you all very happy and restful holidays, and we will be in touch. We have not gone away. So have a wonderful, wonderful day. Any feedback, you can always send to me, and please fill out the survey. We need it. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you
all,
you.
everybody. By the way, anybody wants to give me a gift for holidays, I'm happy to accept it. Just let you know.
Hope your address is in the Google form. Thanks,
Mine's
John.
in the mail.
Thank you guys so much. I enjoyed it.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, guys.